Welcome! Today, we're stepping into the dark corners of the human mind to conduct a psychological autopsy of human error. We're going to explore the unseen, quiet forces that operate in our brains right before the worst happens. This is an explainer of the cognitive biases that get people killed.
Part 1. The Mechanics of Disaster.
To truly understand disaster, we have to shift our focus from individual accidents to predictable, systemic failures. It really begs the question, why do capable, highly intelligent people walk willingly into a catastrophe, ignoring danger signs that look so painfully obvious in hindsight? Well, in this explainer, we're going to uncover the hidden mental mechanisms behind disasters we've actually covered earlier in this series, like the collapse of Rana Plaza and the tragedy at Jonestown.
Part 2. Defining the normalcy bias. Let's look clinically at our first psychological pathogen, the normalcy bias. This is simply our brain's default assumption that life will continue as usual even when we are staring right at clear, undeniable warning signs. It's actually a cognitive mechanism meant to reduce stress. When faced with something unimaginable, the brain tries to protect us by simply pretending it isn't happening. Tragically, this causes people to deeply downplay severe, impending threats. To see this in action, we need to plunge back into the freezing Atlantic on April 15, 1912. Picture the SS California, halted in the ice, floating just miles away from the sinking RMS Titanic. The officers on the Californian stood right there on their deck, and they literally watched 8 white distress rockets rise from a ship on the horizon. They even remarked to each other that a ship doesn't just fire rockets for nothing. But then, the normalcy bias took over. They rationalized the flares away, deciding they must simply be company signals. And because of that assumption, they chose not to wake their ship's only wireless operator, who had gone to bed just minutes earlier.
Over 1,500 people died that night in the freezing water. They died well within sight of a ship where the crew just assumed everything was fine.
Part 3. Rana Plaza. Warnings ignored.
Now, this bias isn't just history. It operates today, and it escalates dramatically when compounded by financial threats. On April 23, 2013, workers found massive cracks running through the concrete columns of the 8-story Rana Plaza building near Dhaka. The danger was so apparent that an engineer inspected the site and immediately ordered it closed. But the building's owner, Sohel Rana, publicly insisted the factory was totally secure.
The very next morning, despite the glaring physical evidence of structural failure, factory managers applied intense pressure. The threat was blunt: return to your sewing machines or lose a month's wages. Facing devastating financial ruin, the hesitant workers were forced back inside.
At 8:54 a.m., the power failed. 3 minutes later, at 8:57 a.m., heavy diesel backup generators automatically switched on. Imagine the ominous sound and feel as that heavy equipment sent massive vibrations rumbling down through the already compromised concrete columns.
Within a minute, the entire 8-story structure completely collapsed. 1,134 people were killed. Normalcy bias, combined with severe financial intimidation, blinded thousands to an imminent collapse.
Part 4. Groupthink and the Challenger.
This brings us to our second psychological pathogen, groupthink. Coined in 1972 by psychologist Irving Yannis, groupthink happens when a cohesive group suppresses internal dissent just to preserve harmony and avoid conflict. The overwhelming drive for social consensus completely replaces logic and safety, even when members privately know the decision is wrong. The most tragic and heavily documented case of this systemic failure is the Space Shuttle Challenger. The night before the launch, freezing temperatures were forecasted. Engineer Roger Beaujolais frantically warned management that the cold would stop the rocket booster's rubber O-rings from sealing properly. He and his fellow engineers formally recommended a delay, but NASA managers pushed back hard, questioning the data and pressuring for a reversal. Yielding to authority, the contractor's own managers overruled their engineers and told NASA to proceed. 73 seconds after liftoff, the Challenger broke apart. All 7 crew members, including teacher Krista McCauley, were killed.
Janice mapped out the specific symptoms of groupthink, and NASA and its contractor exhibited almost all of them. They had an illusion of invulnerability, there was intense, direct pressure on dissenters, and ultimately, management acted as mind guards, silencing warnings to protect the launch schedule. When a group prioritizes its internal bonds over external reality, it stops thinking and starts merely agreeing. Part 5. Closed systems and obedience. Now, these exact same symptoms show up in completely different, deeply isolated environments. Think back to our earlier explainer on the isolated community of Jonestown. The mechanism there was fundamentally identical. A cohesive group silenced all internal doubt to protect the leader's absolute authority. Dissent was lethally suppressed until it was far too late to matter.
Part 6. Why our brains fail. Let's bring this all back to the psychology operating in your own mind. It is absolutely crucial to understand that falling prey to these biases is not a sign of stupidity. They are just our brain's default mental shortcuts. The problem is, they misfire catastrophically when they are placed under extreme pressure, like the presence of overwhelming authority, deep isolation, financial threats, or immense time constraints.
If we tie the normalcy bias and groupthink together, with the obedience to authority we explored in our Milgram experiments explainer, a terrifying picture emerges. These are really just 3 faces of the exact same underlying human failure: the active choice not to question what is directly in front of you.
Which leaves us with a final, necessary question. Where are these patterns quietly operating right now in your own workplace, your family, or your friend group? Notice them now before the cost becomes irreversible. Thank you for watching Dark Chronicles, real stories, verified sources. Follow for more.